Welcome everyone to our topic extension about the topic of the second lecture about internationalization. The table of contents. Today we'll talk about the lecture. We'll give you a brief recap about the Uppsala model. Then we'll go on with the topic extension of the Uppsala model, and we'll finish with the key takeaways. So the Uppsala model was introduced in 1977 by Jan Johansson and Jan Erik Falne in Uppsala, Sweden. Principally, this model describes a domestic firm's entry in a foreign market as a stepwise internationalization process. So a process in which the enterprise gradually increases its international involvement. The first step they have to take is familiarize itself with its domestic market before considering a market abroad to internationalize. Secondly, the business may choose to operate abroad in a nearby market, which is defined as having a closer distance to the domestic firm and a few resource commitments. Hereby, distance is defined as psychic distance, such as language, culture, politics, religious, and geographical distance. Thirdly, a business may choose to enter a market abroad through export, thus not using sales or manufacturing subsidiaries of their own to be introduced abroad. And lastly, the firm may decide to establish wholly owned or majority-owned operations abroad after several years of international experience. This fourth step implies a further distance between the domestic market and foreign market, and more resource commitments. Then such a firm can be considered as a fully multinational firm. Hence, the Uppsala model suggests that firms internationalize to markets they most easily understand, which results in a rather low market uncertainty, combined with a low degree of risk and thus a relatively low failure chance in terms of the internationalization process. During the process, the domestic firm faces increasing commitment and an increasing spread while including safeguards for the firm. These safeguards include, for example, avoidance of large-scale investments, losses, and testing one market at a time. So the process is influenced by an interplay between the firm's development of knowledge about the foreign market and operations and increasing commitment of resources.
Moving on to the topic extension of the Uppsala model. First, we need to answer the question, why do we even update the Uppsala model? This has to do with the model being outdated, and not only because the Uppsala model was introduced in 1977, but also because of novel theoretical contributions that have been developed during the last decades. For example, also Falne and Johansson, who are the original inventors of the Uppsala model, have updated their own original Uppsala model. This first topic extension is as well from Johansson and Falne, who found the emerging network view crucial to take into account when explaining the characteristics of the internationalization process with regards to industrialized markets. So, when doing further research on the internationalization process, both found it fundamental to include the relationships between parties with regards to all business activities, and especially when exchanging knowledge with each other. The most important point for this model update was or is the mutual commitment or interdependence. Meaning, additionally, learning as well as commitment processes develop from both sides of the relationship. So not only from the focal firm, but also from, for example, the focal firm's supplier. If a firm develops more and more relationships with other parties, they together can create a network. Each party included in such a network is then considered as a so-called insider. Hence, network insiders might enjoy all the resulting benefits of their relationships, while network outsiders, so those who are not joining the network, cannot, and thus they may suffer from a liability of outsidership which in turn may increase their level of uncertainty. And well, from this we can conclude that internationalization can be used as an entry into a network and thus may serve as a competitive advantage. So if you have a look at the figure on the right, this is the updated Uppsala model of 2009. And the idea of the state variables and change variables has not been changed, as you can see. However, the knowledge of opportunities has been developed due to finding out that market knowledge is not the only type of knowledge, but that there are also different knowledge types, such as relationship-specific knowledge. Knowledge of opportunities will then lead to relationship commitment decisions, which has also been adjusted. Trust building also is changed due to it being the basis a firm can learn from and to develop new knowledge and for building relationships in general. Therefore, trust building, learning, and creating are thought to lead to a network position when implemented well. So, in general, the adjusted Uppsala model of 2009, so the figure on the right, still illustrates the interdependency between knowledge, development, and commitments, as the original model did as well. However, due to developed research findings, the concepts of the model have been adjusted, and consequently, MBE orientation has changed towards a more innovative understanding and relationship building idea than before.
Next topic extension of the Uppsala model is based on the update by Wallner and Johansson from 2017. It focuses on the change from internationalization or globalization to the evolution of MBE. In both versions, the original and the 2009 and in the 2017, the Uppsala model consists of two sets of variables which affect each other, which are state variables and change variables. And in this update, in 2017, all the variables changed relative to the previous update, but they still represent commitment, knowledge, and development, and how they affect each other. Therefore, to discuss this update, we will focus on the commitments and performance state variable, and it will be based on the article by Halt et al., which is called the Theoretical Evolution and Use of the Uppsala Model of Internationalization in the International Business Ecosystem, and this article also encompasses Wallner and Johansson update from 2017. So the new model alters the market commitment stage from the original model to commitment and performance instead of network position from 2009. By doing this, Wallner and Johansson made clear that the original market commitment is still important, but meanwhile they kept the importance of the position in the international business network for the performance of the company, which was developed in 2009. Therefore, one can argue that the 2017 update is a mix of both approaches used before this update. Next, this update states that firms' abilities to commit themselves to the markets or to identify their market position are of a limited value if by using them the companies cannot achieve a better performance than other companies. The implication of that is that if there is no positive performance out of the commitment or of the market position for the company, the internationalization process will not be valuable in the broader context as stated in the article by Halt et al. Therefore, it can be understood that in the 2017 Uppsala model update, the fundamental part is the competitiveness of a firm within the IB ecosystem and not just within a network or based on commitment as in the adjusted model of 2009, and that additionally the relative performance of the company is also of much importance.
Okay, so I will be briefly covering Uppsala model extension by Dow et al. But first, some background information. So previous empirical investigations have shown only weak support for the Uppsala model. The growing field of research on born global firms is almost entirely based on firms that appear to differ from the original Uppsala predictions by expanding rapidly after inception into foreign markets and not in a slow incremental fashion as the Uppsala model suggests. So there have been multiple revisions of the original Uppsala model, and these include a market-oriented version, a network-oriented version, and a globalization version. So all of these versions have been compiled into a meta model, as you can see in the screen. But all of these models still follow the same underlying change mechanism. So the learning commitment cycle remains the same. So what does that mean? To put it simple, the longer you are in the market, firms will learn more about the environment and build stronger relationships. So Dow et al. Challenge these assumptions and say that inertia and managerial intentionality are further factors that have to be taken into account. So on the next slide, you can see the extended version of the Uppsala model. So as you can see on the right side, there are several inertia factors which I will briefly describe. So the accumulation of specialized assets. So by becoming experts in their respective fields, making them focused on their specialities, firms tend to overlook changes in the environment. Inter-organization inertia networks lead organizations to an inward network focus. So they focus on what's inside and not outside, making organizations less open and less responsive to external developments. And finally, would be the individual level biases. So people are creatures of habit and don't like changes. To overcome these inertia factors, Dow et al. Theorized that for a firm to break free from inertia, it requires managerial intentionality, which can be described as a management able to achieve organizational adaptation and being able to react to changes in the external environment. So by introducing these two new factors, the assumption of the original Uppsala model that the passage of time has a positive impact on internalization is refuted, because the passage of time can also lead to inertia and not only improvements. Managerial internationality can act as a release mechanism, enabling organizations to adapt quickly to external developments and thus overcoming inertia.
We've come to the key takeaways of this topic extension for the Uppsala model. The Uppsala model is, even after 44 years, still a very relevant and useful model for firms who wish to internationalize. However, we also believe that after all these years, the model is outdated. But that doesn't mean it's not relevant, because it's still a very useful basis for other models to be built upon, which can complement each other, of course. The original model by Janssen and Valner proposed that firms in general tend to follow a process of gradual incremental internationalization, and that resistance to a change of state is attributable to a key limiting mechanism, which is the risk and uncertainty arising from imperfect knowledge about foreign markets. However, we believe that nowadays there are some questions, challenges that international firms face that the original model can't account for anymore. An example of this new market dynamic, for example, is an important theme such as sustainable development, but also important themes like the challenges of globalization, or questions surrounding the pandemic, for example. We believe that the Uppsala model needs to be updated to still be as relevant as it was 44 years ago today. We've reviewed for this topic extension 3 articles. The first one is by Valne, and Valne added some very useful information, and with the emphasis on the relationships between parties, which was fundamental. The second article is by Hult et al., but it is actually an analysis of an article by Vaughan and Johansson, but Hult analyzed it from an international business perspective, and Hult placed the valuable emphasis on the competitiveness of a firm within an IB ecosystem, which is relevant for us IB students. And the third article we reviewed is by Dow et al. And Dow placed a valuable emphasis on the enhanced role for inertia, managerial intentionality, and on environmental changes. So yeah, this was our topic extension. We hope you learned something from it. We hope it made you think. We want to thank you for your attention. If there's any questions left, feel free to ask. Here are our references. And yeah, we wish you a very nice day.